In this nugget, we're going to install Configuration Manager. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's get started with an installation of System Center. Before we do that, I want to just give you a little overview of our demo environment. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because I also want to make it easy for you to set up your own virtual machines, and that's what I would recommend. Just have a beefy enough laptop or server somewhere, or even a desktop workstation. I'm using Windows 8.1 with 16 gigs of RAM and VMware Workstation. And all of these machines that you see up here on the screen are virtual machines running off of that machine, of that host machine. So I want to make this easy for you as well, because not all of you are working yet with System Center Configuration Manager in production. Plus, if you are, you don't want to just experiment with things that I'm showing you here. You want an isolated environment where you can test things out and click on stuff and see if it'll break something and all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of trying to make the demo environment easy for you to work with. And to that end, not only am I going to demonstrate the full installation of the Configuration Manager down here, this is the meat and potatoes of what we need to work with in this nugget, but I've also created this document. It's called the SCCM Installation Cheat Sheet, and it's available in the Nugget Lab files. So if you haven't already located those and you're a paid subscriber, then you'll see over to the right of the viewing area for the video, there should be a link there for Nugget Lab or Nugget Lab files, something to that effect. Usually it appears above my bio, but our webpage may change over time. I just want to make sure that you know those files will be plainly visible on the page where you're viewing this video somewhere. Okay, so they'll be available. Anyway, there's a couple of pages of notes there. There's a lot of different gotchas that you could run into when you try to install System Center. Also here, I've got DC Nugget 01. This is my domain controller. I'm not going to show you how to install that. I think at this level, if you're working with Configuration Manager, you may already know what a domain controller is. So I think you already know how to install that and work with accounts and things like that. This, after all, is a little bit more of an advanced collection, advanced course. Windows 8.1 0-01 is the name of the computer. And obviously, as you can tell, it's a Windows 8.1 computer. You could do all of the stuff I'm showing you, I think, pretty much on any operating system from, say, Windows Vista up. Then also, we have CM01. Now, in the early parts of the demos that I'll be showing you here, this is not yet a Configuration Manager site server. By the way, site server is kind of a collective name for where you've installed System Center. And you can add or remove roles and different functionality to it. But in our case, we're going to collect everything about Configuration Manager onto a single server. The purpose of this is to use fewer virtual machines so that it's less exhausting on your host machine, and so the performance is better. And also, we just want to make the demonstrations as compact as possible so they don't have to flip back and forth between multiple different machines. It kind of gets to be kind of like watching a ping pong match if you go back and forth between too many machines. And so, for the most part, you'll just see me working on Configuration Manager throughout the rest of this series, and then you'll probably see how that affects maybe a bare metal machine that we're doing an installation on, or a Windows 8.1 machine, and we'll see how it affects that machine. Also, do note that I'm co-locating SQL on my Configuration Manager server. That certainly is something you can do. If you split them up, so that SQL's on one server and Configuration Manager's on another one, you can service up to 100,000 clients. But if you're going to co-locate them the way I have, then Microsoft recommends no more than 50,000 clients on that configuration. Now, one of the first things I'm going to point out here on my Configuration Manager server, here I'm on CM01, which once again is not yet a Configuration Manager server. I got to do some other stuff in advance. One of those is that we need to extend the Active Directory schema. Now, here I've gone to the source files for System Center. And again, we're working with System Center Configuration Manager 2012 R2. And you go to the SMS setup directory, the bin directory, and then x64. And then down here you should see extadsch. That's going to extend the schema. What you want to do with this is just simply right-click on it and choose Run as Administrator. Now, I can do that here on the Configuration Manager server because of a few reasons. Number one, it's already a member of the domain, and you should do that before you install Configuration Manager. Make sure you join it to the appropriate domain. The other reason that I can do this here is because I'm logged on with administrator credentials throughout the forest. Okay, so I'm logging on with the administrator account, which I've actually just renamed to trainer. And as such, that administrator account is a member of domain admins, enterprise admins, and for this purpose, and most importantly, is a member of schema admins, which gives me the authority to modify the schema. So I would just double click on this, and then even though this is not a domain controller, it'll reach out and it'll make all those changes on the domain controller, and bam, it's really just that fast. I think I'd already done it in the past, so there's really not much to see here. But if we double click on this file in the root, extend AD schema, or you can see it right there, then we'll see all of the changes that it would have made. And you can see here it says these already existed, and that's because I already did this at some point in the past. If you want to know more detail about what actual changes take place when you extend the schema for System Center, then refer please to this TechNet article. Now, as with all references that I make to TechNet, remember, for English-speaking people in the US at least, all the first part of this is the same. All you really need to do is to look for that. In fact, you can even just Google that, and pretty much a good chance, a 99.9% chance it'll give you this exact article. But anyway, here it tells you whether you want to extend it, and generally speaking, you definitely want to extend the Active Directory schema if possible. That's going to make things easier. For example, it'll make devices more easily find the appropriate configuration manager components and pieces. And it gives you some details here, but here's where the attributes and classes that are added by the Active Directory schema extensions, this is what they actually are. Now here, once again, is a reason why we don't have to be too concerned about corrupting the rest of Active Directory, because if you look at this, all of these have SMS, right? All the attributes and all the classes. So these are their own animal. They only affect SMS, and even though they're in Active Directory, that's the special purpose for which these attributes and classes are made. It's not like we're modifying the user password attribute and we, misspelled something and messed it up or something like that. So anyway, if you have an administrator or a manager somewhere that's a little concerned about what you're adding into this, then you can just show them this is all we're doing. We're just making these changes right here. Doesn't affect any other Active Directory objects. Also notice that it's kind of a holdover for SMS. The original version of this was called Systems Management Server, or SMS. And then it got changed to System Center Configuration Manager 2007, and now we're on 2012 in R2. But the original version, SMS, which sometimes people called it, a lot of expletives, by the way, because it wasn't really as great as it was advertised initially, had a lot of the right ideas, it just didn't do it very well. Some people also called it slow-moving software. That was kind of the other joke that they made about it. Now, we're actually on a pretty good version of this. This stuff actually works, folks. But I only point this out so that you know that a lot of the remnants for the old SMS naming convention are still here, and that's okay. Just I want you to make sure you're not confused about what that is. So anyway, you change the schema, you extend the schema like we just did. The next thing we need to do, and I'm going to switch over to my domain controller right here, is we need to go ahead and also, let me recenter this a little bit. We need to also make a change to something here as well. We're going to go to adsi-edit.msc, and we need to add something called the system container. Now, if you don't already see ADSI-edit here with the domain and everything like that, just connect to the default naming context, and then just click OK here. Okay, and that'll get you all of this stuff here. The reason why mine appeared immediately is because I'd already connected there at some point in the past. But you just browse your way down through here till you get to the CN equals system. And in this, you'll want to right-click to choose a new object. When you create a new object, you want to create a new container, and then click Next, and then you'll name this, and I've already done mine, but you'll just name it System Management. Exactly that, and it is case-sensitive. Unlike a lot of other Windows things, this is case-sensitive. Also, notice that it's not Systems plural management. It's System Management. All right. Anyway, once you've got that done, the other thing you need to do here is to give Configuration Manager computers the ability to read and write to this container. It's specially dedicated for System Management Configuration Manager. So we'll go into this and go to Properties and then Security. And then what you need to do is add your Configuration Manager computer into this. Now you can say I've already done mine, but what you would do is you just click on Add, go to Object Types, make sure you select Computers, OK, and then type in the name of your computer. Mine was CM01, and there it is. It's already there anyway. And then give it full control. Now, if you have multiple Configuration Manager systems, you probably would just add them to a security group instead, and then give that group full control. That would work out just fine as well. And then here I switched back over to CM01, which again is going to be my Config Manager server. Now I've already installed SQL here, and I've already got, for example, the SQL Server Management Studio here on the taskbar just outside of your view, but I'll click on that, and I want to point out a few different things while I'm kind of waiting for this to load. First of all, what kind of requirements do you have for SQL? Let's take a look at that. If we go over here, you'll see that there's SQL Server requirements for System Center 2012, R2, and it gives the various different types of products under the System Center family. For example, Operations Manager, what else have we got? Service Manager, all these other different ones, right? And it tells you the version of SQL that you can use. You're supposed to be able to use SQL Server 2014. I did run into problems with that, however, on my side of things. So I'm using SQL Server 2012. Service Pack 1, I think, is the one I wound up with. Anyway, what you want to do with this is once you've installed it, you want to then right-click on the server up here in the SQL Server Management Studio and go to the properties. One thing you want to make sure is if you're in an English-speaking language, that you make sure that the server collation that appears down here is SQL _ Latin 1 General CP1, whatever all the rest of that is. Okay, and that is the default, by the way. And during the setup of SQL, it gives the option to change that if you want to. Just don't change it. That's all. The other thing we want to do is to adjust the memory. SQL is kind of the brunt of some jokes sometimes because of how memory hungry it is. If you take a look at the memory, what it usually says 0 is the minimum, and the maximum is something like, I don't know, 2 terabytes or some ridiculous high number of memory that probably nobody ever has. So anyway, for our demonstration purposes, and likely also for your own lab purposes, especially if you're on limited equipment, back this down probably to about 4 gigabytes of memory, like you can see I've done right here. Okay, and that's what it should be it. SQL should be ready to go then. We're just going to work with all the default properties and all the default stuff with SQL here, and we should be fine. And I almost forgot to show you something, so I jumped back over to Management Studio to show you under logins here. Notice that I have a domain account named SMS Admin. You can name it whatever you want to, but I just called it that. And during the installation of SQL, I pointed to this as one of the administrator accounts that I wanted to use. So that being done, I also added in trainer just for good measure. But that being done, then I want to also point out that when I double-click on this and go to the server roles, make sure that sysadmin is selected. So this SMS admin account, or whatever you name yours, has to have the sysadmin and the public check marks selected there. In addition, the service for SQL must be working with a specific logon as well here. So if we go to services, there's SQL Server. By default, if you go to the login, it has some of their local login. I can't remember which one it is, but anyway, you can't use that though in conjunction with Configuration Manager. So what you could do is you could specify an account and browse for a domain account that's designated for this service, for example. Or you can use the local system account. Both will work just fine. Okay, so that's the other thing we have to do in relation to SQL. Now also, if you decide to put SQL and Configuration Manager on different servers, you need to make sure that you allow through your firewalls TCP 1433 and TCP 4022. Allow those through the firewall so that SQL and SCCM can communicate, and so that SCCM can contact the database. Okay, so the other thing we need to do is to actually add a bunch of roles and features and different things here. I've already added all of mine. The rest of them, and again, there's a bunch of them, are included in the cheat sheet that I referenced for you a little bit earlier. But for example, you'll have to go through here and you'll need to go and add in, what was it? A lot of the web server items. There's several different web server things you'll have to select. Okay, there's also, bits. There's the .NET framework. You can use a couple of different versions if you want. I've documented those for you. So there's several different things you're going to be adding into that as well. Again, I've already done mine here. Now, another thing you'll need to do is to go to Microsoft's website and look for the Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit. We're using the 8.1 update version. And if we zoom in here, you can see the URL for that if you need to make note of it. But it's probably easier just to search for this. Anyway, then you'll download that, and the reason for that is because it's useful for things like migration. There's the user state migration tool, there's various deployment tools that can be used, and so forth. A lot of these components are used with Configuration Manager when you do things such as operating system rollouts. Now, because of all of the prerequisites that I've already kind of met in advance, we're pretty much on the way there here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the source files. If you look at the source files on the DVD or whatever, if you download the evaluation version of Config Manager from Microsoft, then they send it to you in files, like what we're seeing here. Anyway, the SMS setup directory is where most of the meat of this is, but I wanted to point something out here. If we go to Splash and double-click on that, then that opens up, the splash screen that we hear, where you can click Install and so forth. Now, the previous version of Configuration Manager, in other words, 2012 without the R2, if you would click on Assess Server Readiness or some verbiage to that effect, it would launch a prerequisites check. Now it just takes you to this handy little web page. So what you need to do is to actually go to the directory, go to the SMS directory, bind, and then x64, and then run prereq check.exe /local. And you need to do this, I think, as an administrator. I'm just doing it as an administrator regardless. But anyway, once you run that, then it'll give you any yellow warnings or red X's. Any red X's you have to stop for. We're going to get 2 yellow warnings here, which are innocuous for our purposes, and I'll explain why when we get to these. Actually, first of all, this WSUS one, I'm going to get to WSUS later on. We're going to use Config Manager for performing our updates, and it actually depends upon a WSUS server and interoperates with it. But I'm just going to install that later. The other thing here is you can see that I backed down my SQL Server memory allocation just for our purposes, and that's a very practical reason for that. Here it's thinking I might not have enough memory, but it doesn't know that. I'm not about to do this for 100,000 users. I think I'm going to have 2 or 3 or something like that, not very many. So anyway, because of the fact that I've done all of those prerequisites in advance, then we're not going to get stopped with any red X's here, but I'm just going to now click on Install, and as we click next to the initial part of this, what we're going to do is to just show you some of the various options that we have here. Okay, so let's just kind of center this, and there we go. What we're going to do is to install a Configuration Manager primary site, and we're going to use the typical installation options, which will also make it a standalone primary. You can see the things that it's going to do. It's going to make it a primary site, default paths, local SQL server. We're going to use a enable a local management point and distribution point. So distribution points are normally where the source files are located, for example, maybe install files, software, that sort of thing. Management point simply being that this is really where I manage the console, and it's where the guts of Configuration Manager is. I can install a Configuration Manager CAS if I want to, but I'm not going to do that in this case. I can also upgrade this Configuration Manager site. If I had Configuration Manager 2007, for example, or 2012 without Service Pack 1 or 12, I could upgrade this existing site. I can also recover a site. So what I could do with that is if Configuration Manager had gotten corrupt somehow or something like that, then I need to rebuild it. I can recover that site here as well. You can also perform maintenance or reset the site. These are grayed out because I don't already have an existing site, so obviously there's nothing to do. And I can also uninstall. And again, since I don't have it installed already, you can't uninstall it. But anyway, those are the various options. I better get rid of these updates here. Those are the various options that we have available to us there. And then as we click on Next, here it tells me that I'm using a standalone primary. Notice that it says here you can expand this site into a hierarchy at a later in time by installing a CAS. This did not used to be possible under 2012 before Service Pack 1 and R2. Then we'll go ahead and click on an evaluation product, and we'll agree to the license agreements all the way through here and sign our life away. As we click on Next through everything else, we can download required files. I previously downloaded them, so I'm just going to point to my C drive where they are currently located under SCCM download, and as I click on Next, it'll check through those files. And then what we'll do is wait for the next screen to come up, and we're going to specify the name of the site. So we'll enter in the site code. So Phoenix is what I just usually do the city codes, like airport codes. Actually, and as I say that, I mistype it. Okay, so let me go back here and fix that. This also can't be changed, by the way. So you gotta make sure you get this right from the beginning. Don't do like I did and mess it up. And then you can enter in the site name. I'll call this Phoenix SCCM site. It's kind of arbitrary, that part of it is. And then we can specify the installation folder. Also, notice that we can install the Configuration Manager console. By default, that's going to be installed here. Otherwise, you have to go back through and do it as a separate step. Also, you can install the Configuration Manager console on your workstation, such as a Windows 8.1 workstation, Windows 10, whatever it is. That way you can remotely control your Configuration Manager. I also do recommend that you join the Customer Experience Improvement Program. Microsoft actually does analyze the crash logs and things like that that occur if a problem pops up. And then as we click on next, it's just going to again go through the prerequisite checks. We'll see the same things we saw earlier. So that's nothing to be concerned about here. We're going to install WSUS later, and we've got enough memory for our demo purposes, and it's just going to continue on through the rest of the prerequisites. And then once it's done, we'll just click on Begin Install, and it'll go about its business. Getting started probably take me 8 or 12 minutes, somewhere in that range, depending on how much else is going on here. By the way, as this is all installing, it occurred to me, I wanted to show you something here. Take a look at this article. I don't know if you can see it there up at the top, but it's, again, a TechNet article right here. And this will show you, let me show you the title of it, Planning for Hardware Configurations. This will show you the minimum requirements for site servers. And look at this, 32 gigabytes of RAM and 8 cores. Holy cow. Okay, so again, we're way beneath that. We don't really need that for our demo purposes. But if you do have a larger organization, you're really going to have to account for that. Look, you could even go with 64 gigs of RAM and 16 cores as a recommended minimum. So this can be quite demanding in terms of the hardware, depending on how many clients and the infrastructure that you have. And we see here it took about 11 minutes, 11:48, to install all of this. If you want to, you can go through the view log here. I'm really too concerned about that because I got all green check marks. It's always nice to see. But if you wanted to view the log, it'll show you every little thing it did in excruciating detail. Okay, so if you have trouble sleeping at night, just go look at that, and you'll probably go to sleep right away. Okay, I had that open for a long time. I actually paused recording for quite a while, so the console kind of just croaked on me right there, but that's okay. There's nothing to be concerned about. Nothing to be concerned about here, folks. Next thing we'll do is go to the Windows screen here, and as I go down through, let's take a look at our System Center Configuration Manager console. Where is it? Here it is, Configuration Manager console. So I'm just going to go ahead and launch that. By the way, I'm also going to pin that to my taskbar area, which is just outside of your view at this time. And anyway, once we do that, I'll pin that right here. Once we do that, then we now have the full console that we need to begin to administer Configuration Manager. But that's enough for now. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. But first, before we wrap it up, I want to point out a couple of articles to you. One of them is right here, this TechNet article right here, which shows what's new in System Center 2012 Configuration Manager Service Pack 1. There's actually quite a few features in Service Pack 1 that are new. And then there's also the new features here in this article, right here, for R2. Okay, so both of those. And I do recommend you read through both of those. However, I will also be going over a lot of these new features just as we go, as they appear within the various topics. For example, we did that even in this nugget, where we talked about the fact that after you install a standalone primary, you can still extend the hierarchy if you install a CAS later on. That's one of the new features that we have there. In this nugget, we installed Configuration Manager. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.